it's all about. So what we'll be talking about tonight is what is CBD, hemp-derived versus medical marijuana-derived CBD, the legality, isolated CBD versus full-spectrum extracts, laboratory testing, the endocannabinoid system, potential therapeutic effects, and the future of CBD. So we'll start off with what is CBD. And anyone, if I need to speak up or anything, just let me know. I know we don't have any amplification here. All right. So CBD is a secondary metabolite phytochemical compound produced by cannabis plants. It is one of an entourage of chemicals produced by cannabis, classified as cannabinoids. They're actually more than just that cannabinoid. THC is obviously the most well-known. There's about 8 cannabinoids in total, including CBD and THC. There's also CBG, CBN, CBC, and THCV. Those are just a few. They all have therapeutic effects. What's unique to CBD is that it's completely non-psychoactive, meaning it doesn't produce any kind of intoxication or high, and it maintains the many therapeutic uses of other cannabinoids.
If you were tested for it, would you test positive for marijuana use?
So that actually will come when we go to isolated CBD versus full spectrum.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all
right
in there. Yeah, so this is just what is CBD for anyone who doesn't know. And it can come from medical cannabis or industrial hemp. So industrial hemp-derived versus medical marijuana-derived CBD. Industrial hemp is defined by the law as any cannabis plant that tests under 0.3% THC by dry weight. And you know, this is confusing for a lot of people because cannabis really botanically is cannabis. Hemp and medical marijuana are, you know, genetically the same. There's only one gene that's going to be, you know, driving the difference in like CBD primary production versus THC primary production. And so the other question we're asked about this scenario is there a difference between the CBD that comes from hemp versus medical marijuana? And the real answer is once it's purified and isolated to, you know, 99% CBD as an isolate, there's absolutely no difference. The differences really come in if you're doing a full spectrum extract because once you isolate something, you take out all the other compounds. So for full spectrum, hemp is going to have legal levels of other cannabinoids, whereas full spectrum medical marijuana extracts will have higher amounts of THC, and you'll need a license or, you know, have to be part of a medical marijuana program to obtain that. And in the United States, only hemp-derived CBD products are legal for customers without a license and that are used for 50-state commerce. What really does matter when you're deciding on what CBD to use and what plants to obtain the CBD from is the growing conditions of the plants. And this has a lot of conditions, you know, soil contamination, fungicides, pesticides. People are concerned about industrial hemp because in Europe it's used a lot for bioremediation, and that's when plants are used to remove toxic substances from the ground, such as heavy metals, lead, mercury, different things. And that's because cannabis is a hyperaccumulator plant. It tolerates these toxic chemicals very well, so it'll actually take them out of the soil and translocate them to the plant tissue. So during the extraction process, that obviously can create some pretty bad impurities, and you wouldn't want to ingest anything like that. So now, isolated CBD versus full spectrum. Isolated CBD is going to be single molecule CBD. It's going to be, you know, 95 to 99% pure CBD with no other cannabinoids at all mixed in there. Full spectrum, on the other hand, is going to have those other cannabinoids, but it will still, if it's hemp derived, is going to be under the 0.3% THC. That being said, you know, even though that's such a low amount of THC, there's actually some people that are hypersensitive to THC and will get intoxicated from a full spectrum extract. And as you were asking, it will also could potentially, not definitely, but it could make someone test positive for cannabis on a drug test, which is obviously a huge concern if someone's using something that's legal and they don't want, you know, it to interfere with their job. An isolated product is going to be, you know, the choice that you want to go with if you're worried about anything like that at all. And also with the intoxication. So the other part of the full spectrum, though, there's something called terpenes. And these are the basis for aromatherapy. They're simple, organic, aromatic compounds. And when I say they're the basis for aromatherapy, that means that they're actually what make up the different essential oils and give you these therapeutic effects, such as like lavender. The dominant terpene is linalool, so it's very calming. And we actually have started to get different hemp-derived terpenes to add back into our products to round out the spectrum, because we do use CBD isolate. Our products are fully insured, and that seems to be the better way to go if you're trying to get insurance and do things properly. Full spectrum just has a lot of variants, and there's just a lot more legal issues and things like that to deal with. That's why we've decided to go with isolate for our products. And then the CBD economics, the weird thing about this whole situation is that you would think CBD isolate, being a more refined processed product, would be more expensive. But for some reason, it's actually the complete opposite. Full spectrum tends to be a lot more expensive. And I think that has to do with the difficulty, because you can make a full spectrum very easily that's, you know, 3 or 4 or 5% THC, because if you take a plant that's 0.3% THC and concentrate the contents, it's going to increase in potency. You know, so it's really hard to get a full spectrum extract that's under that 0.3%. And I think that's why the market is where it is pricing wise. So we offer isolate because it's the best price we can find for CBD per milligram for our customers. And we try to balance, you know, the holistic with the economic aspects of everything, because we know financial situations are very hard to change sometimes, and we want to make sure that everyone gets what they need. So this slide talks more about terpenes. We actually have a little display over there with cups with actual different substances. We have lavender, we have hop powder, we have black pepper and cloves. And so all of these, myrcene is the dominant one in hops. And I don't know if you guys can read everything from back there, but it tells you all about what the different terpenes do. Limonene's more uplifting. Linalool and myrcene are both more sedating. Alpha and beta pinene are very interesting. They are bronchodilators. So those actually open up your bronchial tubes, help with asthma and different things like that. And that display over there, I'd highly recommend going to look at that. It's just really interesting to, you know, think about, put everything together, what's actually happening chemically with the things that you see every day. I'll pass it off to Rachel.
All right. I get a little nervous, so I might say a few times, so I'll try not to. So basically, Drew's touched on full spectrum versus CBD isolate. So all of the information I will be presenting to you pertains to CBD isolate, because that's what our products are made out of. So first, to start off, is the endocannabinoid system. So this is something that is naturally occurring in your body. It's a complex communication system. And it's a key player in regulating a lot of our daily tasks, in our physiological tasks, like mood and blood sugar. So the discovery of this system has been very important in the aiding in developing more understanding to human diseases and their mechanisms. So another important mechanism of the endocannabinoid system is this concept of anaglesia. And that is the ability to feel pain. And CBD comes in just this one circumstance, in this mechanism of anti-nociception, which is the process of blocking pain from painful stimuli that is set on by the sensory nervous system. But CBD also works with the endocannabinoid system and other ways by triggering these naturally occurring receptors that the endocannabinoid system has throughout your body. Okay, so important thing to point out is that CBD is not FDA approved right now. So that basically means that we have a lot of information that is not quite into clinical trials, or there is some clinical trials going on, but it's just not quite at the point where they could say that it is scientific fact. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So the difference between a preclinical trial and a clinical trial, because you'll hear me discuss that quite a bit, is a clinical trial involves healthy human subjects or human subjects that have a specific condition, and a preclinical trial involves just cell cultures and animal models. So sorry, this is a little small here, but so the potential therapeutic effects of CBD are caused by mainly the interaction of these CBD with these CB2 receptors. There's also CB1 receptors. So the CB1 receptors are found mainly in the brain and on neurons and glial cells, and the CB2 receptors are in the immune system. When a CB1 receptor is activated, that is what produces an intoxication or a high. So a THC directly interacts with CB1 receptors. However, CBD does not have a very strong affinity for the CB1 receptors. It has a very strong affinity for the CB2 receptors, which I said were found in the immune system. So if CBD does interact at all with the CB1 receptors, it produces little to no effect, and people do not feel a high. There's also other brain signaling systems that CBD interacts with, like dopamine and serotonin, which they believe is responsible for producing the antipsychotic and anti-anxiety effects. But the mechanism of that is still a little faulty right now. They're still trying to understand that. And there's also many receptors that are found on the skin. So this is where your highest concentration of these endocannabinoid receptors are found. So this makes it a great way to get CBD into the system by applying it to the skin. It makes a very powerful localized treatment. So by interacting with these receptors, we get a whole range of effects that we're seeing, including anti-seizure, antioxidant, anti-tumor, antipsychotic and anti-anxiety, anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, blood sugar regulation, and treating substance disorders. There is a lot more of effects that they are seeing, but I'm just going to touch on these few right here because this is what people have been able to gather the most clinical research on. So I just wanted to put this in. This is just a kind of a nerdy picture I wanted to include of, as you can see here, this is the CB2 receptors and CB1 receptors over here. And here's your cannabinoid. So you can see they're interacting with both. They don't really show a difference between CBD and THC in this. But I just kind of wanted to show you what it looked like for a molecule to interact with a receptor. So once this binding happens, then a chemical reaction will occur that will produce some kind of effect in the body. So anti-seizure is one of the things that is most commonly heard right now for CBD being used therapeutically for. There's a lot of preclinical trials going on right now. And it's shown that, so preclinical animal models, it's shown that CBD is actually reducing the severity of the seizures. And it's also now commonly being used to treat pediatric drug-resistant epilepsy and Dravet and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and those are both pretty serious pediatric seizure syndromes. So the next thing is anti-anxiety and antipsychotic effects. This appears to be caused by the alteration of the dopamine and serotonin receptors, but they still don't understand the full mechanism of this. So they have done some clinical trials with human subjects in which they administered CBD to these volunteers and then forced them into a stressful public speaking task, and they were able to see a measurement of the social anxiety reduction. They've also done some animal models, and they were shown that these animal models, that the CBD, after it was administered, that different psychological and stress-induced behaviors were reduced, like heart rate. And then also they did a laboratory developed study examining PTSD, and what they found that it improves the consolidation of extinction learning. So this essentially means forgetting traumatic memories. And then also another really important thing for CBD, especially for people that are using medical cannabis, like Drew touched on, there are some people that are very sensitive to the intoxication effects of THC. So THC actually can mitigate or reduce the intoxication effects of THC. And it also can reduce the risk for acute and chronic psychotic episodes brought on by THC. So kind of a commonly heard of thing is maybe someone engaging in THC and then having a certain psychotic episode being brought out. This could actually be reduced or reversed by CBD consumption. Okay, so it is also being seen to be a neuroprotective and an anti-inflammatory agent. So it's a potent antioxidant, which basically means that it will reverse oxidative damage in the cells. So I'm sure you guys heard a lot about antioxidants recently. This is a huge thing for aging and cancer, also different neurodegenerative diseases, like Alzheimer's, stroke, glutamate toxicity, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and also neurodegeneration caused by alcohol. And one thing that's important that we wanted to point out is that the FDA, or actually, sorry, the US government has a patent right now on CBD as an antioxidant, which is kind of an oxymoron since they don't see it as having medical benefits. So we just wanted to point that out, that it is actually a potent antioxidant. And the way that it is an inflammatory is it decreases cellular activity that is related to inflammatory responses. So they're actually examining this right now preclinically for anti-tumor effects. And then actually some great news is that it's been funded pretty fully actually right now by industry professionals. So they're going to start human cancer trials soon examining CBD. So the last thing I'm going to touch on is treating substance abuse disorders. This definitely is a huge thing in our country right now. So they have a lot of preclinical trials going on right now. So what they found is that CBD actually reduced the rewarding effects of heroin after it was administered, and it also decreased cue-induced heroin seeking. So actually NIDA, or the National Institute of Drug Abuse, is currently supporting multiple ongoing trials examining CBD for substance abuse disorders. So these are just a few major ongoing clinical trials, so trials that are being done on human patients right now that I just wanted to point out. So we will know more, and this is the steps that we need to take into getting CBD approved as an FDA-approved drug. It's more of these kind of trials, and then we will know more for specific populations and conditions. So the first one is called Mixamol. This is a synthetic CBD, and it's being used right now in clinical trials to examine cancer pain and rheumatoid arthritis pain. And they've actually found that the pain so far has been decreased for these patients. Another one is Sativex. This is a synthetic THC and CBD combination, and this is being used to treat multiple sclerosis, and they found that the quality of life has increased for these individuals. And then the last one is Epidiolex, and this is a purified CBD extract, and it's being held right now by GW Pharmaceuticals, and they are looking at pediatric epilepsy and Parkinson's disease, and they also are seeing great results with this. So like I said, there's still a need for FDA evaluation, and also so that we can look at certain populations, certain genetic factors, and specific conditions that will give us more insight what this could do for everyone. So lastly, these are some important things to know about taking CBD. First, we always recommend that everyone consult with their doctor and tell them any supplements that they're taking. Although we would like to point out there's been 25 studies done. They did not identify any significant side effects across a wide range of doses. The drug, like I pointed out before, nabiximols, is being used in Europe and other countries for quite a few years now, so there's extensive info available about the metabolism, toxicity, and safety of that drug. And then also to remember that it's an antagonist to THC effects. So like I said, it can mitigate those effects of the THC high for those of you that are using medical marijuana. And then one other thing that is important to note is that CBD is a potent deactivator of P450, cytochrome P450 liver enzyme. So this enzyme is responsible for breaking down a few pretty common drugs. A few that pretty common: warfarin, prednisone, a few epileptic medications, and a few birth controls like Yasmin in particular. So what we like to warn people is if they have a certain medication that has been warned to them to watch with the consumption of grapefruit, that they should probably definitely consult with their doctor, or at least be wary about taking CBD and mixing it with that medication, because it will make that medication less active in your body. And then the last thing that we wanted to touch on is that we get this question a lot: is CBD good for sleep? So yes and no. They have done human studies with this. So what they found is that when subjects were given a high dose, approximately 160 milligrams, that the sleep was actually increased the duration of sleep compared to those subjects that were just given a placebo. However, if a low dose is administered, about 15 milligrams, it has an alerting effect, which actually increases wakefulness during sleep in healthy human subjects. So if you are using CBD for sleep, we suggest tinkering around with the dose to find out which is alerting to you and which is more sedating. And I'll switch it back over to Drew now.
All right. One thing I would like to, just a personal footnote on the FDA, what we would like to see, and like how it really, cannabis in general is an herbal supplement. We'd like to see it stay out of the FDA and go to pharmaceutical companies. We'd like it to be an herbal supplement industry that more people can take part in, and have it be not unregulated, but just not hyper regulated like the pharmaceutical industry, especially since it's such a low toxicity, low risk substance. Anyways, now to the legality of CBD, which everyone always is very curious about. Really what started this whole CBD craze was the 2014 Farm Bill. Was really when a lot of people started growing hemp. It created a safe, legal atmosphere for states to create pilot programs for testing the commercial viability of hemp crops. And that also includes its extracts and derivatives, not only the fiber and seed, different things like that. It also clearly says it's derivatives, which CBD would be one of those. And the Controlled Substance Act only has jurisdiction over psychoactive derivatives of cannabis, which CBD is completely non-psychoactive. That is why it does not fall under the Controlled Substance Act and is not Schedule I substance.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So even if it's derived from the medical marijuana?
So that's a whole thing, you know, if it's isolated to 99% CBD, there's no genetic material in that CBD, so there's no physical way a lab's gonna be able to tell you that it came from medical cannabis. But technically that would not be, it would be a faux pas because you're using something THC rich to create the CBD product. But I mean, from a chemistry and like analytical standpoint, if you isolated the CBD from that plant, there's no way they'd be able to tell. But that being said, we use all Colorado grown hemp. It's grown for CBD, so it's not grown on contaminated soil. They don't use pesticides or fungicides. Our isolate comes from them. They deal with only one farm and extraction facility, they're partners, and that's where all of our stuff comes from. And so there has been a few lawsuits because of statements that were made by the DEA, two of which I'm going to talk about. Big one in 2004, the Hemp Industry Association won a court case against the DEA, which ruled that the DEA didn't have the authority to ban hemp under the Controlled Substance Act. And by that ruling, similar to non-scheduled hemp food products, this allowed Medical Marijuana Inc., one of the big players in the industry, to sell online and distribute to customers in all 50 states. The only exception to this now, there are 2 states that have made CBD illegal, one of which being Nebraska. The other one's escaping me right now. I want to say Utah, but don't quote me on that. So that was a huge win. And now, more recently, the DEA has made another statement. They created a new code for their paperwork or whatever that made a specific code for cannabis extracts. And people were concerned that this was a direct move to go after CBD since it's an extract of cannabis. And so what has been said by a lawyer that's representing the Hemp Industry Association, that thing that the DEA, right there, it says DEAs exist to enforce, not to create laws. And, you know, Drug Enforcement Agency, Congress is what makes our laws, so they can't just, you know, make up new things to go after. It has to go through the proper checks and balances like everything else in our government. So that's the grounds that they're going after the DEA on for this newest lawsuit. And no one is really worried about it in the industry, really, as far as I'm concerned. It's really just a hiccup. And one other thing that's very important, the FDA has made it very clear that a couple things, that we're not allowed to recommend specific uses or doses to people. And the other very important one that I didn't write, but we never recommend, like we don't recommend using it for pediatric applications. That was one thing the FDA and DEA like strongly like went after some of the companies about. They said the fact that children are using this and it's not proven, as she said, all this information is, you know, preliminary evidence at this point. So they're saying they're quoted saying that all these companies putting out stuff for children are putting these kids at risk. So that's another thing that we definitely don't get into at all. Everything is up to the customer once it leaves our hands.
So when they're saying it's putting children at risk, have there been any clinical trials to prove that they're putting children at risk?
Just like the kind of stuff she's mentioned, there's nothing that's proved like that it's dangerous. They're just saying it's at risk because they're not positive it's safe.
Because they don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. All right. And laboratory testing. This is very important. Why laboratory test? There's a lot of reasons. The most obvious being potency, just to make sure you're getting what you pay for. That's one of the reasons we do this. The other reason is to make sure everything's free of contaminants and it's going to be as effective for you every single time, consistency. We actually source our CBD, like I said, from a partner in Colorado. They test the CBD out there and then we actually receive our batch and get it tested again at MCR Labs in Massachusetts. And you know, we're not required to do this. This is just something that we do. We believe this is best practice in keeping quality control very high. So what you want to look for with labs is the ISO certification. It's the International Organization of Standardization. And it's important to note that if your lab says it's ISO certified, it doesn't necessarily mean every test that they offer is ISO certified. You actually need to go through a certification for each test that you offer. So they have to get certified for cannabinoid potency testing, they have to get certified for pesticide residue testing, for residual solvent testing, for all of these things. And I believe they even have to go through, like for residual solvents, they actually have to go through like alcohol certification, heptane certification, butane certification. Like every single solvent they test for needs to be certified. And so that's very important to ask, when you're dealing with a lab, if you ever get anything tested yourself. So all laboratories also have a degree of variance. This is very important. There's a lot of questions about, what lab's better and this and that, and really the best answer is to look for that ISO accreditation. And the variance so Colorado State has set standard deviation limit for cannabis potency testing at 15%. We think this is pretty reasonable, and we've decided to adopt this as like our practice for our company. So we, have a cutoff at 15%. If anything comes out above or below that, we'll, donate it or, figure it or sell it at a discount, do something.
I don't understand, 15% of what?
So within 15%, so if we say something's 100 milligrams, it's either going to be as low as 85 or as high as 115 or anywhere in between. It's not going to be outside of those parameters. So
it's
within
15% variable.
Yeah, variance on the test result. And that's actually what Colorado State has set as their law for cannabis potency testing. And the last thing to say is like pay-to-play labs. This is the kind of thing where you get these results and you're like, wow, this is great. And you submit something that's like not so great looking and you still get these great results. And that's something that we've seen from labs trying to get you to come back because they want to give you the best results possible, thinking that, oh, they're definitely going to come back because they get more money for their product, having it higher testing or cleaner testing. And that's definitely something just to be aware of. I mean, it's not the case all the time when you're getting good numbers. It's just something to be aware of.
So how do you identify a pay-to-play lab?
I mean, the best thing you can do is, use another lab to check. Like compare labs. That's really the best way to do it. We've been dealing with NCR for a really long time now, and we've had both bad and good results. That's why we trust them, and we've had really good luck, and they are ISO accredited for all of their tests right now.
So because there's no standardization at this point, when you're looking at a label, how do you compare labels? And how do you compare products? What are you looking for? What should all products have? What should products never have?
So that's a really good question. So there is a lot of deceiving labeling going on. Specifically, you'll see stuff like, it'll say 500 milligrams of aerial plant parts, right? So that's like a half of a gram of actual plant material that went into that product. If that plant material is, 15% CBD, you're only getting 15% of a half a gram of what went into that is active ingredient. But sometimes on the back, it looks like you have 500 milligrams of active ingredient, but the plant itself is not like entirely active. Only the CBD is what's gonna, what you're going after. With full spectrum, obviously there's a little bit of other stuff in there, but it's still gonna be, mostly plant material at that point. So you really want to look for, the amount of CBD in a product. Like if it says anything about aerial plant parts or hemp or anything like that, I would get wary. Like look for the milligrams of CBD, like in a container, and it should be labeled very clearly, like how much is in the entire container and how much, for ours, like it tells you how much is in each dropper for the tincture, or how much is in each container for like granola and stuff like that, or the salve says very clearly how much is on in each container or each serving. So
Is it actually legal in Connecticut to have CBD oil, anything?
Yeah, if it's completely. If it's under 0.3% THC. Yeah, really.
Does that say on the label? The percentage of THC?
THC. If it doesn't have THC, then it won't. For instance, like our products, like we don't print the lab results on it, but we provide them And we also it's all displayed online, so if you go to mcrlabs.com and go to clients, go under RopaNa, everything we've ever had tested will come up and you can see everything we've done with them. And yeah.
If you don't recommend doses, how does anyone know where would you ask for doses?
So we just use vague statements like, so you just start low and work your way up, and basically, you know, kind of use the products as your guide. Like for instance, like we make a 250 milligram tincture, that's the weakest one we make, and it's 8 milligrams per dropper full. So, you know, that's gonna be the weakest tincture. So, you know, just thinking like 8 milligrams is probably a lower dose. Like if I wanna go even lower, I'll just take half. I'll start there. And that, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, if you can get away with using like 4 milligrams at a time and get relief for whatever you're trying to do, you'll get a lot more for your money. So that's, I mean, how we get around it is we just try to tell people, start as low as you possibly can, because it's gonna help your wallet, it's gonna help you in the long run get more relief. Yeah.
I wasn't here for the first half hour of this. I don't know if you went over pets?
Oh, no, we haven't.
Okay.
I'll touch on that at the end.
Okay.
Unless you have a specific question now.
Well, I was going to see what dosage is, although you can't suggest dosages.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, for pets, we actually, they're not under the jurisdiction of like FDA and stuff, so we can, it's a little more open.
For a 128-pound dog, you would give it?
No, exactly. No, we won't go that specific. It's a brown. You can, I mean, I believe, so, I mean, our dog, for instance, is 60 pounds. We give her anywhere from 15 to like 60 milligrams of THC, or CBD. And it depends on what we're using it for. You know, if she's really anxious and jacked up, we'll give her the 60 milligrams. But if it's just like a maintenance dose, just like first thing in the morning, we give her just a small amount, and she's just calm all day. Maintenance.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I saw on the information that was posted on your website today that you got, well, I saw your website and that you have the salve and the tincture and the chocolates. And and I was just wondering, for somebody, what do you recommend for people to use? Is it someone who just wants to sort of have like a, you know, constitutional?
So really it would be whether you're going for internal or external. So internal would be, you know, ingesting the CBD. It's something, so if you need it for mood or, you know, digestive issues or something like that. But if you're using it like specifically for some kind of like skin condition or pain, topical pain, then you would, you know, go with a salve. But for someone who's trying to use it internally is kind of what I think you were asking. Like on a regular basis, we would suggest the tincture. Just because the truffles are more of a treat, just like, you know, have an extra amount of CBD with your truffle, just to have, you know, a nice after dinner thing or something, and also with the therapeutic.
With the salve, like I have a friend who has some aches and it's not like on her skin. She has a lot of aches and pains, and so you think using a salve in the areas where she has aches and pains, or I don't know if you want to.
No, that's fine. So if it's
Or internal.
so like something like widespread like neuropathic pain, stuff like that, it's best to attack it like from both angles. Like if you can get the salve and then also use a tincture, it's gonna help a lot better, for sure. No problem. All right. So the future of CBD, I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear that the price will go down. That I am very confident in. The amount of hemp that has been grown in Vermont alone within the past year has increased. I can't give you an exact number, but at least tenfold, probably much more. And down in Kentucky, in Tennessee, those areas are growing thousands of acres of hemp for CBD production. And all of this combined across the country, more and more states are going with the legalization of hemp, if not, you know, medical cannabis or recreational cannabis. So the price is absolutely going to go down. Hopefully we'll see it go down on full spectrum. We'd love to start offering a full spectrum line of our products just as an option for people. CBD, may be manufactured in the future by genetically engineered yeast rather than grown by plants on cannabis. And I actually have a professor at the University of Connecticut who's working on this right now. And he thinks, I mean, it's definitely going to save resources if we do it like that, you know, and it will definitely drive the price down. It's just, there's definitely some ethical issues that arise with that kind of thing. And I think there'll definitely still always be a place for plant-based medicine, like truly plant-based. Even the CBD isolate, we catch, you know, some criticism saying how, you know, how is this plant medicine? It's so refined, but it still, you know, comes from the plant. It's extracted, it's not synthesized, so it's all science. Then multiple industry-funded human cancer research trials are in progress or set to start soon, as Rachel was mentioning. We expect to see more and more of this as the laws and legislation continue to move forward, hopefully in our favor. You never know with the Fed. It goes, you know, each day is different. Statements go back and forth, but we're very optimistic. And the National Institute of Health, I think Rachel mentioned this as well, is supporting a number of studies for the therapeutic effects of cannabinoids, which is very different from a lot of the studies that were funded previously by, you know, the NIH or the National Institute on Drug Abuse that were specifically aimed at finding the problems and side effects of THC, or like why it's bad for you. You know, it didn't study the therapeutic effects at all. So this is a great turning point in our legislation for sure. So the last thing I'll say is the CBD market is projected to reach $1 billion by 2020, and a couple more numbers just to throw at you. The average top 9 companies made an average of $2 million last year in the CBD industry, and the largest one made $9.4 million, and that's Charlotte's Web Hemp out of Colorado. Probably seen them on CNN. Sanjay Gupta talked them up. That's why they're probably doing 9.4 million sales. But yeah, we don't want to be that big. We just want to have our little slice of the market. Actually, 79% of the CBD market right now is accounted for by small businesses like ourselves, with, according to Forbes, with insignificant sales compared to the millions with the other ones. But there's a lot of room to you know, carve out your own piece of the pie. And I think those are our sources, and I think now I'll open it up to questions for both me and Rachel if anyone has more questions.
So you did thoroughly cover this, but if you could just recap quickly one more time. Why is the isolate better than the full spectrum?
So it's not necessarily better. They both have, so the full spectrum, actually I think I might have skipped that a little bit. So there's something called the entourage effect. So the different cannabinoids work together synergistically. So if you have a full spectrum, you might actually be able to use less of it and get more effects, but you run that risk of testing positive or getting intoxicated. So it's really just, you know, it's just a choice. They're just different. You know, I really believe they both have their place. That's why that's why I'd like to offer a full spectrum in the future as an option. So yeah, it's really, nothing's better than the other. It's really just what works for you. We recommend trying both and, you know, seeing how it works.
The 1,000 milligram bottle, what would the proper dose be?
So it depends what you're using it for, you know, but each dropper is 33 milligrams.
Would you take a whole dropper there?
You can so you can take up to, like, so in our literature, you can take up to 3,000 milligrams a day. So you can, you know, take 3 of those bottles in a day and not have any ill effects. So it's really just experimenting, you know, keep using it until you get your relief and, you know, see what works for you. That's really the best way to do it. But there's definitely no reason you know, to not take a full dropper if you've already been using CBD. Or we just recommend to start low so you don't end up building a